Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. It's your DC Spotlight for December 7th, 2021. Rocky and I are going to be talking about all the DC books that came out this week. A little bit of a lighter week, thank God, because last week was kind of rough with 18 books. I was at LA Comic Con this last weekend. That was a lot of fun. There will be an episode, a spotlight on that coming out later. I'll talk a little bit about some of what I did. And there's also an interview that I'll post with their CEO, which was very, very informative. He had some great things and really cool insight. This guy's been putting on conventions, not necessarily comic conventions, but has been in the trade show business for over 25 years, 30 years, something like that. So he's got a lot of insight, even things that, me as a 11-year, I think at this point, con veteran, didn't really think of because I don't necessarily look at it from the perspective of putting on the show. So I highly encourage you guys to listen to that. Even if you're not somebody who goes to shows on a regular basis, a lot of what he has to say is pretty informative. The other thing I got to do is have dinner with some friends, including some DC friends. We're talking a little bit about kind of behind the scenes and how the sausage is made. And yeah, the paper shortages, and they're working hard. And I want to go on record here publicly as saying that I very much appreciate what they are doing. And they are working very hard to make sure that if we get the digital copy, if it's supposed to come out on a certain day, that's the day it's actually going to come out. And when I stopped to think about it, when I was talking to them, it's like, you know what? That hasn't been the case with a lot of other publishers, with Marvel, with some independent publishers, with Image, where we'll get the digital copy, but the comic book doesn't actually come out that week. It's not actually shipped, or it's shipped, but we don't get the digital copy. And again, there's a lot of moving parts. I'm not blaming anybody for the challenge, but impressive that DC has been on track with everything that's going on. So appreciate that. And I talked to a lot of creators on the show that are, or at the show, that are looking forward to coming on the Comic Source in the near future. So we should have quite a bit of interviews coming up for the 12 days of the Comic Source, all those extra episodes we release leading up to Christmas, and a special surprise. I know one specific thing we're going to be doing for the 12 days of Comic Source. I'm not ready to announce it yet because I don't have the graphics to blast out on social media, but hopefully later this week. Anyway, let's go ahead and dive right in. 11 books this week. We'll start with World of Krypton #1. Written by friend of the show, Robert Venditti. Drawn by Michael Avon Oming. Colors are by Nick Filardi. Lettered by Hassan Otsman Elhau. Yeah, I mean, we've talked in the past about how Venditti's a huge Superman fan. Superman is his favorite character. So I've really been looking forward to this. But I'm really curious to your thoughts, Rocky, especially about kind of the overall feel.
Yeah, well,
considering the art, especially, right?
Yeah, well, I gotta admit, because I'm not like a huge Oming fan, at least with his work at DC. I love his work on Powers, but I remember collecting the classic World of Krypton series back in the 80s. And I don't remember all of it in great detail, but I just remember the House of El and all these incredible stories, which were very, they were given short thrift, but it was just kind of cool to read. And, with Kal-el, Superman in the front saying, "People of Earth, I'd like you to meet my family." And it was so cool, And I got to tell you, the Oming's art is very different than the traditional DC style, but I actually enjoyed his art here much better than I did his art on the Midnighter series. I thought his art was a marked improvement. I got accustomed to it relatively soon. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed this opening issue. I think it's gonna go in some interesting directions, exploring the House of El. It's a little bit almost Game of Thronesy, maybe a little bit, with the House of El and the House of Zod and the Cruel, like the only El member of the El family to taint and stay in the House of El, and betrayal and love, and in the days before Kal-el was born, and Kara Zor-El's christening, and it was just I thought it was well done. It's interesting. Venditti has sort of whet my appetite here, and I think there might be some misdirection going on, but we'll get into it. But I don't know. So far, this opening issue works for me, and we got 6 issues, and I'm really curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, and I sort of feel the same way about it as you, right? Like, of course, I remember the classic World of Krypton. That was Mike Mignola art, some early, the pre-Hellboy Mignola. He had done he had done the Cosmic Odyssey series at DC previous to that
Right.
miniseries kind of event sort of thing. Yeah, and so when I think about it and how much time, because that really it covered all like 4 generations, even more than generations, thousands of years, and it was still written by Byrne, but Byrne couldn't draw everything. He did draw the other one of the other ones. He drew World of Metropolis, I think, and then World of Smallville was somebody else, but he did the covers. Uh, so it's sort of interesting that neither World of Krypton series, neither this modern one nor the one back from '87 or '86, whenever it was, are really drawn by what I would consider traditional superhero artists, which is interesting because I'm kind of the same way. Avon Oeming, and we talked about this when we were covering his Future State work, the Midnighter backups he did. I just don't feel that he's a superhero artist. And granted, this isn't necessarily a superhero book, but I think of him more as a like crime noir, like you said, Powers. It works really well. So knowing he was on this, knowing it was World of Krypton, it's Superman related, and I want it to be good, I was a little apprehensive. But I agree that for whatever reason, maybe it's the coloring, maybe he tried to go for a little bit of a kind of a more open aesthetic. But his art works here. I particularly like the page layouts in terms of the panels and the panel borders that he uses that help give it more of a kind of a futuristic feel. And again, I'll call out Nick Filardi, the color artist, for using a lot of kind
Yeah.
of bright blues and whatnot for the panel borders that look sort of electronic, almost Tron like, and it all helps to sort of sell this idea that this is an advanced culture and advanced society. So I really enjoyed that, and then like you said, one thing that you said when you were talking about it really stuck with me, that Game of Thrones, which I never watched Game of Thrones. I know I'm like one of 3 people on the planet or what have you, but that's a great way to describe it in terms of just the overall political feel, and I think that is very true and something, Metropolis and its ideas of or Metropolis, Krypton rather, and its feel and its history and evolution of its society have sort of changed over time. But one of the things that has always existed from even the earliest was this idea of political factions and different people wanting different things, power and the idea of families and that sort of thing. So you're right. It is from what I know of Game of Thrones, it is very Game of Thrones. So I like that Robert Venditti um, is leaning into that. So yeah, so I'm intrigued. I was impressed with this, and mostly I was just happy that the Avon Oeming art worked, and I think there's a lot here. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I should give more compliments too to uh, Michael Von Oeming. I like this character. I like the costume design of
Yeah,
Jor-El and Laura. I like the costume design of the characters. I thought you can tell he's given a distinctive feel to the different families of the El family, Zor-El's family, Jor-El's family. The most powerful house in on Krypton is the El family. Zod has a distinctive look. Even Kal-el has a distinctive look. It works, and I you really get a feel. Even the backgrounds here, I don't really quite. They seem to, Nick Filardi does a really good job with the colors. It does pop off the page. This is the type of coloring, and this I think I got the distinct impression that between the colorist and Oeming, I think he worked a lot harder on this because I think that he was working out maybe the wrinkles on his work on Midnighter, because this works. This even the facial expressions and the worked for oming here. I mean, and just the whole idea of, it starts off with this Nira who I think is related to Jaxer, one of the Phantom Zone criminals, but she's a scientist, and she discovers that some plant life are dying in the Jewel Mountains, these empathic creatures, and she reports to Jor-El, and this is their she reports to Jor-El while they're basically at, I think, I guess you could say, the glorified baptism or the christening, or it's the naming ceremony for Kara Zor-El. And I believe that Kara was 14 years old, around 13 or 14 years old when Krypton exploded. So I'm guessing, now mileage can vary on this, but I'm guessing that this is probably 12 to 14 years before Krypton exploded, because I think Kara Zor-El was around 13 or 14 when Krypton exploded. And so we've got 13, 14 years to play with here of history leading up to the destruction of Krypton, and so much can happen here. So I think that this is a 6-issue series, but if this is good and this is well received, and because it's Venditti, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt here. I like the art. I like this opening issue. It's planted a bunch of seeds. We already see machinations and plot twists and betrayals already in the making here. And already you see Zod and Kal-el and all these interesting little things. Plus, if you just Google the name Kal-el, K-R-U-E-L, Kal-el, and you just tease yourself with what the history of some of these old characters are. Kal-el was a character that debuted in 1963. He's got a long history. Superman's family history goes well before just the World of Krypton series in the 1980s. So there's so much here that Robert Venditti could do, building on the past lore in the Silver Age, and I'm really curious to see what he does with this. This gets a strong recommendation for me because I think that, in the DC Omniverse of thing, I think Jor-El needs a boost, because I don't like the way Jor-El was portrayed by Bendis as being sort of this insane old man, and I think he got short thrift leading to the aging up of John Kent, and that I'm not a big fan of that storyline. So I kind of like, seeing Jor-El in a more positive light here, him and Lara, and the legacy of Superman.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I didn't care for his characters. In fact, I'd go so far as to say I didn't hate it, but pretty close. I hated Pa Kent's characterization in Man of Steel. Jor-El's by Russell Crowe wasn't much better. But I do wonder. So I never watched The World of, or was it called? No, it was just called Krypton, right? That was on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So because it was David Goyer, who's heavily involved in Man of Steel, and has insulted comic fans at every chance he's gotten.
Yeah.
He basically at one point on a live podcast said, if you knew who Martian Manhunter was, you'd never get laid in your whole life. I mean, the guy's he's just a jerk. Like, and he wasn't joke. He wasn't like he was joke. He also said that She-Hulk was basically a male rape fantasy. Like, the guy said some really offensive stuff, and so I'm not going to support anything they did. But I've heard good things about the show. I wonder how much that show and this have in common, because you're right. Like, the history of the Elf family goes back much further than Superman.
And I think it was the Krypton Chronicles. It was called the Krypton Chronicles in the 80s, that series. It wasn't called World of Krypton, wasn't it?
No. I'm
you're talking about the TV show. I know that.
I'm talking about the TV show. No, there was a Krypton Chronicles in the early 80s, but then when at the same time that Man of Steel came out, the 6-issue mini that rebooted Superman, they put out at the same time as those. They put out 3. And the reason they did that, the 3, World of Krypton, World of Metropolis, and World of Smallville, was because John Byrne didn't want to start his Superman story by retelling the kind of the origin. When action and Superman and adventure started up, he wanted it to be Superman had been around for a few years already. So DC felt like they needed context. So that's why they put out those 3, World of Krypton, World of Metropolis, and World of Smallville, so they could, here's his past of this version of Superman, who was never Superboy, as we all know. So anyway, let's move on. So if you guys haven't heard the news, it's right here on the cover of Swamp Thing number 10. Instead of saying 10 of 10, because last issue was 9 of 10, it says 10 of 16. It definitely got extended, which they didn't even announce when they first announced this. It wasn't even announced as being limited. And then I think a few issues in, they said, yeah, they're only going to get 10. And I think, it was selling well enough. And Ram V, I think, has, a lot more to tell with Swamp Thing. And so for whatever reason, they made the choice, and I think it's a good one, to have this last a little longer. So we get Conduit Part 2 from writer Ram V. Art is by Mike Perkins. Colors by Mike Spicer. Aditya Bidikar on the letters. And overall, I thought this was pretty solid. I'm glad that this, and I wonder how much. I wonder, when did Ram V know? Because this certainly isn't like this particular issue. It doesn't wrap anything up in any way whatsoever. We saw last issue that both Levi and his brother Jacob were sort of trapped in the Prescott laboratory, and with Prescott fleeing, with Jennifer, Levi's sort of girlfriend. I think, like, it's hard to say what their relationship is. It's never been like 100% established.
Undefined.
But
it's complicated.
yeah, exactly. There you go. Exactly. Best way to describe it. But yeah, so they're blowing up the kind of the research facility, and we see in this one that sort of thing continues. Prescott's sort of going scorched earth, so he's not caught, doesn't fall in the hands of anybody, and he does exactly what you'd sort of expect him to do. He's such a kind of scheming Machiavellian figure, and even says at one point, did you ever know me to act without a contingency plan? So he leaves, abandons Jennifer, goes to another one of his facilities, and who shows up there is who you would expect, which is Jason Woodrow, the Floronic Man. And I guess we'll go from here. Now, how brother may have survived remains to be seen. But yeah, I mean, it's a compelling story, and certainly, I think a great job by Mike Perkins on the art, and this is a character that Ram V is very well suited to write. The thing I wonder is, we get a little appearance from Alec Holland here. How are long-time Swamp Thing fans receiving this? Because there's definitely a love for Alec Holland, and I'm wondering, is this the foreseeable future? I mean, DC is known for its legacy characters, Hal Jordan to Kyle Rayner, or Barry Allen to Wally West. So, is this a long-term thing? Is it a short-term thing? Does it matter when it comes to Swamp Thing? Because he looks the same. He's going to be green and planty regardless of who he is. So anyway, I've never been a big Swamp Thing guy myself, and I keep saying I'm going to fall off, but there's always just enough from Ram V to keep me going. But anyway, you've been enjoying this series a lot more than me, Rocky. So what's your perspective on this issue?
I actually think maybe it's just because I'm playing more script doctor here, but I think it would have been better to end this at issue 10, this story arc. I'm all for another 6 issues of Swamp Thing, don't get me wrong, but frankly, I think in my view, when I read this, I thought, oh, well, he obviously, he just tweaked a couple things to extend this story. I think it was obvious that Swamp Thing and Levi and his brother Jacob were basically headed toward some kind of reconciliation, or some kind of, Swamp Thing would have defeated his brother. I think and I think there would have been the status quo would be maintained. Prescott would have escaped, and then the final issue and the final panel would have been a teaser that Dr. Woodrow was being hired by Prescott Industries, with the Pale Wanderer laying on the bed as sort of the cliffhanger, and they could have resolved it. That this could have been a nice cliffhanger 10-issue story. And in a sense, it still kind of is that, but clearly they're going with it. I mean, all the ideas, like this idea that the opening issue is all about the Pale Wanderer, about even bad ideas. An idea is very powerful. Good ideas can endure, but so can bad ideas. And Pale Wanderer is the embodiment of that bad idea. And Jason Woodrow is called upon after the so-called defeat of Swamp Thing and his brother, which are basically, they're frozen by this. They're basically frozen in place, and they're still alive. I think maybe just in some kind of stasis, Swamp Thing and his brother Jacob. But even Prescott, when Prescott says that, did you really think I wouldn't have a contingency plan? Well, I think in the original storyline, I don't think Prescott had a contingency plan. I think Ram V gave him a contingency plan when he found out he got another 6 issues, so 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 he could extend the story. I My fear is that I don't want this to feel like a decompressed storyline from 10 issues to 16. That's the only thing. Because I think that the whole theme and the metaphor of the bad idea and the Pale Wanderer, I thought it was very nice, and I thought 10 issues would wrap it up nice. I hope that this doesn't drag on necessarily and we get a bunch of that this long story is just nothing but a decompressed metaphor for another 6 issues. But I mean, I enjoyed this. But I trust in Ram V. He's earned my respect. And Mike Perkins' art, it continues to be fantastic. That cover B is amazing as well. So yeah, I'm in this for the final 6 issues, no question. And who knows? Maybe we'll get it extended even. Could it be extended to 24 issues? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? As much as like I said, I haven't read a lot of Swamp Thing over the years. Obviously, I'm aware of it, and Alan Moore. It's kind of what put him on the map of American comics. From what I know of Swamp Thing, every series, even when you talk about the Scott Snyder run that went into that turned into the Charles Soule run as Charles took over for Scott when Scott left. It's very much long form storytelling when you're telling stories of Swamp Thing. It's sophisticated and it takes as long as it takes to get where it needs to get. So you kind of wonder, you say we don't want to decompress. Yeah, well, we don't want it to drag on, but at the same time, it's this idea of a more sophisticated way of telling stories like Alan Moore brought into it, where it's that soap opera style, and you have subplots that run for 6 months, a year, over a year sometimes before they finally come to fruition. So I don't know. I guess like crap or get off the pot, DC. Like just make this an ongoing and let Ram V do what he needs to do, or like Rocky said, give it to us in sort of seasons, right? And
Yeah.
don't have it drag on for the sake of having it drag on. So
Yeah.
anyway, speaking of new things, Batman number 118. So this is the new creative team getting started. It's writer Joshua Williamson, Jorge Molina, and Mikel Janin are the artists. Tumeyu Morey on colors, Clayton Cowell on letters. This was interesting. I almost, in a way, don't know how to feel about it. It felt almost like two different stories. It was
Yeah.
such a
It did.
weird, yeah, such a weird way to lay it out. Like it's Batman, and we get a lot of context about how things are going in Gotham, and then all of a sudden he sees some news about, hey, some members of Gotham Incorporated are arrested for murder, and then he leaves Gotham, and that's where he's going to be for a while, outside of Gotham. And so I didn't know what to think. It felt very just
It felt like a wrap up to
incongruous.
Future State, to Fear State, didn't it? To me, it felt like it was wrapping up Fear State, the first half of
A
the
little
issue.
bit, yeah, a little bit in the beginning, and the other thing is, so the art, like, there are times where, and honestly, I mean, at least they did a good job of incorporating these two artists. Like, I didn't even realize that when I first read it that Mikel Janin did some of this art, because it doesn't look like what Mikel Janin's art usually looks like. So I don't know if they made some changes to Mikel's art to make it look like a little more textural. I mean, usually his art is very smooth. So I don't know if Tumeyu Morey did some stuff, or if Mikel himself did some stuff to make it look more like Jorge Molina's art. But there are times where, and the art is good. Like, don't get me wrong, these are beautiful pages to look at, but there are times where particular panels or particular images look more like a cover image as opposed to a sequential panel where it's telling a story and the transition goes in smoothly to the next panel. Um, and so that it didn't necessarily bother me, but it did take me out of the story at times, because I don't think you can say art or an image that makes a really good cover automatically means it'll work for an interior piece. The interior pieces need, it's called sequential art for a reason, and it needs to tell a story. The transitions you can't get lost between, giant pinups where you can't understand what's happening between panels. I mean, there's that whole argument that most of the comic story takes place between the panels, because your brain fills it in. Your imagination fills it in, like what's happening, the movement or what have you, as you're just getting these snapshots. So yeah, the colors are really well done. But I hope that doesn't continue, that feeling of it's just a series of pinups. It needs to be sequential. But as far as the story goes, it's too soon for me to really say that this is going to work for me or not. Because like Rocky said, it did feel like the first half of the issue was a little bit of, okay, let's finish up Fear State. We've kind of got the end of the story of Fear State, tied it all up with Fear State Omega with some of the plot threads, and let us know kind of the status of everything. And now this is sort of like, okay, well here's the state of Gotham City now that Fear State's over, is the first half of the issue. And then the second half of the issue is, well, what's going to be the excuse for Williamson to take Batman and Bruce Wayne out of Gotham City? And it has everything to do with Batman Incorporated, and a surprise last page reveal that I don't know how I feel about yet. Well, I'm reserving judgment. I'll say that. But you know what? It's a bigger issue. Got like 28 pages, I think, and at least there was no backup. Like Williamson got to just do his thing, which I appreciated. Don't give us backups. If we're gonna pay an extra $1, like we've said many times, just make the main story longer. So anyway, what did you think, Rocky?
I actually thought that we could have skipped Batman, that last Omega issue ending Fear State. We could have just jumped to this. I thought Joshua Williamson did a really good job here transitioning out of Fear State. Telling a nice, cohesive, smooth story that was much smoother than I thought the Omega issue was. Transitioning us out of Fear State into his plot line, which is basically Batman investigating the murder of a character called Abyss, and this Abyss character in Europe was murdered by former members of Batman Incorporated. We know that Joshua Williamson is a huge Grant Morrison fan, and he's incorporated Batman Incorporated characters, specifically Man of Bats, El Gacho, the Dark Ranger, the Hood, and the Batman of China. And essentially, they kill this character called Abyss, and Batman essentially goes to another country to investigate it. The first half of the issue is rather curious. He goes to some villains ball, where a bunch of billionaire socialites are cosplaying as Gotham's or Batman's rogues gallery, and he just breaks up a fight there. It was rather odd. It was almost a waste of the first half of the issue, because it was completely unrelated to the actual plot line of getting Batman out of the country to investigate the main storyline where it's going to be moving forward with the Abyss character. So it's very odd. Like you said, it does feel almost like two separate stories, but it's a nice transition out of Fear State into Joshua Williamson's storyline. And I think, dare I say, maybe at the time that Williamson wrote this, he probably, dare I say, maybe Williamson knew that Fear State was going to end a little bit maybe wonky, and it kind of did in my view. So I appreciate what Williamson did here, and the art. I think the art's fantastic. I didn't quite have the issues you had with some of the transitions. I thought it was a nice split between Mikel Janin often draws like the posing scenes and what have you. Jose Molina, I think this is actually a nice combination of artists here, and the coloring is fantastic. I thought, I really like this. Some of these pages are just gorgeous. I mean, just really gorgeous, and it worked for me. I'm even half-assed interested in this story. The cliffhanger here is interesting, and of course, everybody knows that we give spoilers here. So the cliffhanger involves the revelation that Batman Incorporated is being funded by Lex Luthor. And what's interesting about that is we know that Bruce Wayne is not rich anymore. He's not a billionaire, but he's probably a millionaire, but he's not a multi-billionaire. And interestingly enough, Lex Luthor, up until this week, also was not rich, because coming out of the Year of the Villain, Lex Luthor gave up all his money. He gave up all his money to become the Apex Luthor, but he, in the pages that we're going to be reviewing, Superman Son of Kal-el issue 5, where it will be revealed in that issue that we'll discuss later in this podcast / review. We will reveal exactly how Luthor became super rich again, and he's using some of that money to fund Batman Incorporated. And Lex Luthor, by the end of this issue, is the prime suspect for who is maybe who created this Abyss character, or facilitated or encouraged Batman, the members of Batman Incorporated, to do something that Batmen are not supposed to do. They're not supposed to kill. If you're a member of Batman Incorporated, that's the number one rule. You don't kill. So what was it that made these members of Batman Incorporated kill? That's one of the central mysteries here. And I'm curious to see where this takes us and what Joshua Williamson has in store.
Yeah, and I should be clear. I don't think any of the art is bad in terms of like technically bad, like the anatomy and yeah, you're right. It is gorgeous. I think some of the images would be better suited for covers instead of interior art. And the other thing that I'll mention, you mentioned the costume party. We have talked, me specifically, many times on this podcast in recent history about why in God's name would anyone live in Gotham City with all the craziness that goes on there. Kind of going hand in hand with that. Who in Gotham City is dumb enough to dress up like a villain? Like, these people are smart enough to have made billions. I mean, maybe some of them inherited it or whatever. I don't buy that. Like, I get it. It works for the story purposes or whatever, but I don't think anybody in real life, if Gotham existed in real life, anybody would be dumb. Well, first of all, no one would live there, but
yeah,
even if people did, they would not be dumb enough to dress as villains. That's just, yeah, that's insanity. So anyway, speaking of the aforementioned Son of Kal-el, which obviously takes place before the Batman issue, as we just said, because like Rocky mentioned, Apex Lex gave up all his money. So how has he been funding Batman Incorporated? Well, he got his money back. This must have happened a while ago, but yet it had to happen after Superman left Earth. I guess just don't think about it too much. So it'll make sense in your mind. But anyway, this is written by Tom Taylor. Steve Pugh and Clayton Henry do the art. Romulo Fajardo Jr. and Steve Buccellato on colors. Dave Sharp on letters. Yeah, what'd you think, Rocky? Superman Son of Kal-el.
I have mine out of order here. Sorry. Yeah, my initial, let me see here. Sorry. God. Yeah, this is interesting because with John Kent, this entire issue is essentially him meeting Lex Luthor, the return of Lex Luthor. And what I think Tom Taylor is maybe attempting to do here, and maybe I'm being too generous to Tom Taylor, is that he's trying to draw the distinction maybe between how John Kent will handle Lex Luthor versus how his father, Kal-el, would handle Lex Luthor. Because right away at the beginning of this issue, we have a flashback to one of the first adventures and altercations between Superman and Lex Luthor, where Superman defeats Lex Luthor with the help of the Justice League, and Luthor is defeated because of his own ego. He sort of has a shit-eating grin on his face, and he reveals what his plan is. And of course, Batman records it and is threatening to show the world what Lex Luthor just said. And so Lex Luthor's ego got the best of him, and he was Martian Manhunter pretended to be Metallo, and they really pulled one up on Lex Luthor. And so Lex Luthor's own ego defeated him, and of course it always does. And it's followed up by a prison scene where Superman is essentially talking to Lex Luthor in prison, and Lex Luthor wants Superman to play a game of chess with him. And Kal-el doesn't really he doesn't believe in playing games. He doesn't want to play chess with him, but he kind of does. But Kal-el is more concerned about making his point, telling Lex that, look, there's so much you can do for the world. Imagine how powerful we could be if we teamed up, how much good we can do. But of course, Luthor's ego, ultimately, he's all about control. And Kal-el truly believes that Lex Luthor is so much about control that if he can't control it, if he can't control and dominate something, he doesn't want to help it. He doesn't want to steer it. He wants to be in control of it. And his need for control of everything ultimately makes him somebody who is more prone to be, unfortunately, more of a dictator and somebody who dictates as opposed to help. Now, we flash forward, interestingly enough, when we flash forward, then we look at John Kent and how John Kent views Lex Luthor. And we have, there's a lot of scenes here that I, quite frankly, that I think, as a constructive criticism of Tom Taylor, that I think are just filler. I think there's a lot of wasted pages here with him playing with a Superboy, John Kent playing with a polar bear. I think a lot of useless scenes with him talking to Lois that I don't think really move the narrative forward. This could have been, you could have taken at least 20 pages off of this issue, in my view. This could have just been a single 22-page comic. I think a lot of it was sort of unnecessary, but I guess you got a good scene with John Kent talking to a polar bear that he names a polar bear named Gale. I don't know. I think it's the more significant aspects of the issue is John Kent's relationship, how John Kent views Lex Luthor in my mind, and versus how is he different than his father, Kal-el. That relationship, that connection between Superman and Lex Luthor is iconic. It goes to the heart of the Superman mythology, Superman versus Lex Luthor. How does Kal-el deal with Lex Luthor? How will John Kent, his son, the next Superman, deal with Lex Luthor? We got a nice callback to the Superman movie with sort of an AI Kal-el talking to his son in the Fortress of Solitude. That's interesting. Of course, it reminds you of like Jor-El speaking as a hologram to Kal-el, his son. And now we've got Kal-el talking to John Kent in the Fortress. And you got to wonder if they're preparing us readers for the fact that maybe, in fact, Kal-el will be off the playing field for a long time after Warworld. Who knows? But I find it interesting how at the end, I really love the ending where John Kent confronts Lex Luthor and the manner in which he confronts Lex Luthor. He's a lot more in your face with Lex Luthor. John Kent actively engages Lex Luthor in finishing the chess match that started between Superman and between Kal-el and Lex in the prison. And John Kent, frankly, lures Lex Luthor using his ego again, luring him into a false sense of security, preparing for the match, almost kind of showing off a little bit. That's how I viewed it. Now, it'd be really interesting to hear your take on this, Jace. I viewed it as this John Kent is a little bit more willing to jump into the fray. He's more willing to engage Lex Luthor head on. Whereas his father, Kal-el, was always wanted to try to reach Lex philosophically, to try to talk him into something. Whereas John Kent is willing to jump into the fray, into Lex's arena, and to beat Lex at his own game in order to make his point. And I'm not sure if it will be, Kal-el said to his son at one point, I've tried so many ways to reach Lex, but I failed. But we were never told as a reader, what exactly did Kal-el think his approach to Lex was? We know that he failed, but how can you treat Lex different that you're going to have a different success rate? What advice did he give John Kent? We don't really know. All we know is how John Kent deals with Lex at the end by defeating him in that chess match. So it'd be interesting to see, hear your thoughts on that. As for Lex Luthor becoming rich again, he basically blackmails three fellow supervillains. The most common one being Blockbuster. I'm not familiar with the other two, but he actually blackmails three supervillains, one of them being Blockbuster in Bloodhaven, and using nanites. And if they didn't transfer him $1.7 billion, he would kill them and it would be untraceable. And so that's how he became rich, and that's ultimately how he ends up being able to fund Batman Incorporated, I'm assuming, in the comic we just reviewed. But I'm curious what you think, Jace, about what is Tom Taylor trying to say about the differences between John Kent and Kal-el in his approach to Lex Luthor? Or is he saying anything useful at all?
Well, it's interesting because he makes the point several times. He makes it at least 3 times, I'll say,
Mm-hmm.
that Superman underestimated Lex Luthor from the beginning. And then, you know, during that hologram scene that you mentioned, Superman even says, I made a lot of mistakes with Lex. I don't want to see you, make the same mistakes. And Lex himself, in trying to manipulate John, says, yeah, your father and I got off on the wrong foot. And John replies, yeah, he said something similar, but they mean something completely different. Lex is trying to play the I'm not the bad guy card. He's trying to say, yeah, the relationship your father and I had, it started off as sort of this miscommunication. I'm really not the bad guy that your father thinks I am. Whereas what's actually the reality is that Lex is more Kal-el is he always sees the best in everybody, right? He wants to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. He sees the best in humanity. And that even extends to Lex Luthor when they first met, regardless of which version we're talking about, post-crisis, pre-crisis, certainly the Byrne era. He always wanted to believe that he could reach Lex. And then over the years, with all the horrible things Lex has done, he's come to the realization that maybe Lex is the one person that's not going to change. That's going to always be looking out for his best interest over anybody else's. And so, when he's telling John, I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I did, I think what he's saying to John is, I don't want you to underestimate Lex the way that I did. And I think it's a fantastic use of storytelling to have John Kent actually beat Lex Luthor at chess, because you 100% believe John when he says, I've never played chess. But in the blink of an eye, he goes and reads every chess book there is, and studies every single chess game that Lex has ever played, so that he, instead of the shoe being on the other foot like it is with his father, where Kal-el to some extent is always a step or two behind Lex Luthor in terms of not knowing what he has planned, it's totally been flipped around. And John gets a chance to show Lex that I'm not my dad, and I may be willing to go a step further, but a step further in defeating him, I should say, to finish that thought. But the other thing that John does, he's still a young guy. He still has his ideals, and he kind of flips it around on Lex. He says, I know you're smart enough to know that the world's in trouble. You can't look around you and not see, between climate change and all this political upheaval. And so in that way, he's sort of challenging Lex intellectually to say, hey, you could be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. I know it's all about control with you and power. What are you willing to do to show, how smart you are? Are you willing to help me solve some of these problems? But regardless, if you're willing to help me or not, I will defeat you in the end if needed. And that's 100%. That's 100% in my mind what John is thinking when he flies away at the end, with this big smile on his face, after he's taken the L that fell off of LexCorp, fell down to the ground, and he says, Luthor, you should take the L. I mean, it's definitely a pun, and it's very much a dad joke from Tom Taylor, but it got me laughing out loud. I thought it was fantastic.
Well, L is in loser.
Yeah, exactly. Take the L. Take the loss, Luthor.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's plenty of moments of humor in here like that. I do agree with Rocky that this is a little overwrought. There are definitely could have been a little bit shorter. As far as the polar bear scene, so I follow Tom Taylor on Twitter, and I've met him several times. I'm friends with Gail Simone, who I also follow on Twitter. They have a quote unquote feud.
Right.
And the running joke is Gail's actually a polar bear, and so I think that's where this polar bear scene came in. And then they say the polar bear is going to be named Gail. Oh, that's a
funny.
great name for a polar bear. So that's 100% Tom Taylor, just having fun with Gail Simone. So I mean, I guess if it works, but yeah, but you're right. I mean, this could have been streamlined a little bit, but it does a good job of reminding us who Lex is, bringing it back and establishing Lex as that sort of businessman villain and I think John Byrne was the one that sort of invented that version of him, and he wasn't as much the mad scientist with the armor and out there being active himself. He was hiding behind lawyers and corporations and insulating himself from any of the bad stuff that happened by several layers. He would throw employees under the bus, or oh, it was my chief of security, or it was this guy or that guy, I didn't know about it. And I think that version of Lex actually works much better in my mind than Lex wearing the armor and getting involved himself. So I'm hoping that's the direction that Tom Taylor takes Lex in, and we do see him in his power armor in this issue several times. But I like that idea much better than the Apex Lex version as well, which didn't make sense ever make sense to me that Lex would have trusted. What was her name? I can't even remember her name now. It's the person that invented our multiverse. What was her name?
Perpetua.
Perpetua. There you go.
Yeah. And I find it ironic here at the end that Lex Luthor tells Mercy that one of the supervillains that he killed, who gave him $1.7 billion, but then tried to kill him, and he was ultimately saved by John Kent in this issue. He says he criticizes this Luca character for doing something so stupid that Luca didn't think ahead. He didn't think of the ramifications of his failure. Very short-sighted. And he's criticizing Luca for the very thing that Luthor himself is guilty of, which was what caused him to lose the chess match to John Kent. Is that he didn't think ahead. He didn't think of the ramifications of he was short-sighted. He made assumptions, and it's interesting here that John Kent's comments did sink into Lex, and Lex obviously is of the mindset that the world does indeed need saving. But of course, Lex's idea of saving the world, while John Kent might have been thinking about climate change when he said that to Lex Luthor, Lex Luthor's idea of saving the world might be very different than John Kent's, particularly since he wants to call Henry Bendix to discuss something called the Rising. So it'll be very interesting to see what that is. And of course, Henry Bendix is the primary villain so far in the first 5 issues of the main series of Superman, Son of Kal-el. So it'll be interesting to see where we're headed.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that when we saw Bendix show up, in terms of having Bendix be kind of a Lex Luthor type villain for John Kent. Now we get Lex Luthor as a villain. I mean, they're very similar in a lot of ways. They're powerful, they're smart, they're scheming, they're Machiavellian, they're white dudes, they got a lot of money, and they're both bald. So, not to be confused with one another. So it'll be interesting. Tom Taylor's got to be sure that he differentiates between the two, because you could easily, I mean, everything that happens in this issue, almost you could substitute Bendix for Luthor. So you want to make sure that's not the case. They need to be distinct.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. We have Batman 89, issue number 4. It's from writer Sam Hamm, Joe Quinones on art, Leonardo Ito on colors, Clayton Cowell on letters. I'm going to echo what I've said about this all along. It feels very much in tone and spirit like the Tim Burton version of Batman. It feels like it would fit very well in that movie universe as a movie. I'm not the biggest fan of that version of Batman, so for me this is okay. But I will say that I really like this. I really like this Robin. I think that this version of Tim Drake, which I suppose in a way is a little bit of a mashup of the Tim Drake version of Robin, but also I get a little bit of a Duke Thomas vibe, the Signal.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
so I think it works on a lot of levels. The only thing that did kind of bother me about the issue is Barbara Gordon is an extremely smart individual and knows a lot about technology. And regardless of whether she thinks this version of Selina Kyle, who is supposed to be some sort of computer technology consultant. Um, there's no way Barbara Gordon gets up from her computer and doesn't lock her computer, and there's no way she gives access. Like Barbara Gordon is Oracle, in the regular DC universe. No way she gives this person that she doesn't really know access to her computer.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. It doesn't happen. That was like, no, that bugged me. But maybe that's just because I work in IT for my day job. As far as the art goes, it's been fantastic throughout. I mean, Joe Quinones is a brilliant artist. He's a chameleon. He can draw in many different styles, and that was fantastic. He draws these characters, especially Bruce Wayne, where he looks enough like Michael Keaton, but he doesn't try to go like photorealistic. And the same thing with this version of Two-Face and poor Billy D. Williams, who's now horribly disfigured. So yeah, I think it works on a lot of levels. I will say one more thing. I'm glad we didn't get this movie in, I guess it would have been 1995. Tim Burton had left the franchise, and we got the Batman and Robin movie that brought Chris O'Donnell in as Dick Grayson version of Robin, with the Tommy Lee Jones Two-Face, and Jim Carrey as the Riddler. I don't know that Billy D. Williams in this version of Harvey Dent works in that movie. So anyway, what do you think, Rocky?
Well, this is unfortunately, because I just feel like I'm Robined out with the series Robins, and I think we're getting so much about the Robins in the Batman film. I really do think I got Robin fatigue, and unfortunately, Batman '89 just suffers from the fact that, and this is not the fault of writer Sam Hamm, who I think writes a good story here. I just don't feel like reading another Robin story. I also think the reason why I'm not enjoying this Batman '89 as much as I'm enjoying Superman '78, because we're not getting enough Michael Keaton here. I miss I like Michael Keaton. I love all the Christopher Reeve we're getting in Superman '78. I really enjoy that. He's the heart and soul of that comic series, Superman '78. Michael Keaton here very much is he's a guest star in this Batman '89, and this is really the Robin story. This is a young man by the name of Drake Winston becoming Robin, and that's fine. It is like it's all right, but it's not. It doesn't feel like it just doesn't feel enough. There's not enough Michael Keaton here to satisfy me. I also don't find it. I don't find myself invested enough in the story here. Although I will say that there are good moments between Michael Keaton and Drake. I can understand why Michael Keaton likes Drake and why Drake likes him, and there's good moments where they're both aware that Drake knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman. Bruce Wayne knows that Drake is this new character that's been upsetting corrupt police in Gotham. So there's some good rapport there, and so there's some good moments. I really like the moment between Barbara Gordon and Selina Kyle. I actually wish, quite frankly, there was more of artistic similarities between Michelle Pfeiffer's look and Selina Kyle's look here. I wish there was. I think that would have made this feel a little bit more in tune. Michael Keaton's artist Joe Quinones does a good enough job with Michael Keaton. I would have liked to have seen just a little better job with Michelle Pfeiffer, a little bit more lifelike. I think that would have maybe got me more into the story a little bit more. But perhaps I'm being unfair because I'm comparing it to Superman '78. That literally feels like an actual sequel to the movie. This doesn't quite feel that way to that same level. Again, it's okay. It's all right, but I'm not invested in this story. I'm not really sure where this Two-Face story is going. I'm not even sure that I care all that much. Batman's got a new Robin. Okay, I'm not. I wasn't captivated by this story. I wanted to stop reading before I reached the end, to be quite honest, and that's so I was a little bit disappointed. But I want to give a shout out here little things like the Kit Kat virus that Selena Kyle has. I thought that was good. There's a reference to Shrek Enterprises by Selena and to the Max Shrek character played by Christopher Walken. Of course, we don't see Christopher Walken's character in here, but I like the callback and the reference. I would have liked to have seen a lot more of the callbacks other than just them giving names to these things. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more, like frankly we're seeing in the Superman 78 series. I'll be very blunt. To me, this Batman 89 comic book should have been about, instead of about creating new characters, it should have been about paying more tribute. But people can disagree with me on that. But I'm having so much fun with Superman 78, seeing different versions of characters. But and that's with all those, seeing Jor-El and Superman again and Lois and all those classic characters. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more familiarity here in this Batman 89. But maybe I'm just being unfair. But that's how I feel. But overall, again, Sam Hamm's doing a decent enough job. I just wish it was maybe a slightly different story. And I don't know if we really needed another. I really don't think we needed another Robin story, but that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is the story that Sam Hamm, he wrote the screenplays for the first two. This is the next screenplay he would have written, and it's the difference between writing a movie and writing a comic.
Mhm.
I 100% agree that we're getting. I said it the first couple of issues. This is like the Billy D. Williams story, and now this issue, it's turned into the Robin story.
Yeah.
We're getting almost no Batman. I 100% agree. That would never actually happen in a movie because you're not going to pay Michael Keaton what they pay Michael Keaton and not have him be on the screen. But you also can. There's things you can do in that medium to get these characters established, much sooner. I mean, if you look at the first movie, there's significant portions of the movie that are dedicated to the Joker. But again, it's Jack Nicholson. You're not going to pay Jack Nicholson to be the Joker and then not have him get his turn on the screen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
I actually,
and you can do that. Yeah, you can do it much quicker.
uh,
In film and television, as opposed to in comics. In order to establish these characters, you've got to give them a lot more real estate.
yeah, no, for sure. I actually kind of wonder in the early '90s, would they have approved this script? I mean, a Black Robin with maybe, yeah, they probably would have, I guess.
Yeah, they would have, because
But
if you remember, there was a lot of talk before Chris O'Donnell got the job that it was going to be Shawn Wayans was going to play Robin.
I thought that was a joke.
I
But
don't think so. I think he was. Yeah, I think it was actually. I think it was actually considered. I mean, I'm not going to disparage Chris O'Donnell's acting, but it wasn't like he.
well, no,
he was,
it was terrible. Chris O'Donnell was
yeah,
terrible as
right.
Robin.
Like,
Yeah. Mm. Nipples on the chest. Anyone?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I actually that movie, that the Val Kilmer Batman and Nicole Kidman as Chase Meridian and over the top Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones, like trying to be even more over the top and played that role so different than anything he's ever done before, trying to compete with Jim Carrey. That's actually my favorite Batman movie because it's so bad that it's actually good and funny, as opposed to the George Clooney, Batman and Robin Forever. That one's
Yeah.
so bad that it's just bad. It's unwatchable.
Oh man,
In
I
my
got to tell
opinion.
you,
But
Kim Basinger was at her height in the Batman movie with Michael Keaton and Chase Meridian, played by Nicole Kidman with Val Kilmer. She was at her hottest too. So there's something about Batman women in the movies that are just good to see.
Except Uma Thurman, who was terrible as Poison Ivy.
Yeah, I agreed.
All right. Yeah, let's move on. The Order of the Arkham City, Order of the World. Issue number 3 is up next. It's written by Dan Waters. Dani is the artist. Dave Stewart on colors. Aditya Bidikar on letters. I have to shout out the variant cover by Gary Frank with Solomon Grundy.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I'll just pose this question: how different and creepy and malevolent in a totally different way would this story feel if Gary Frank was drawing the interiors? Now, I get it. This aesthetic from Dani is creepy in its own right, but it's just not a style of art that I enjoy. I just don't. Like, if you're watching us on YouTube, look at that page that that Rocky has up right now, and you see the detective sitting on the bed there. Um, he doesn't. There's no lines outlining his legs. It's just color, and he has toenails.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand. I I don't understand. I just don't. So that being said, even though I don't particularly enjoy this style of art, like I've said all along, it does suit the aesthetic and the tone of the story that Dan Waters is telling. And I actually enjoyed this issue more than I have any of the previous issues because it had a little bit, I think, a more coherent narrative. Um, what's going on is starting to come through a little more. It's being explained a little better. The story's starting to coalesce. We got a little bit more agency from the Ten-Eyed Man. He didn't seem so crazy and wacky, quite as crazy and wacky. And the same thing with Azrael, despite Azrael's insane zealotry. At least the story's starting to come together. Um, but yeah, I just think when I saw that cover, I was like, man, I get it. Gary Frank, he's really detailed. It takes a long time, and that's the biggest reason that he doesn't do monthly books. But God, it would be I would be singing the praises. It would be probably one of my favorite titles. So just goes to show how important an artist is. But again, I'm not disparaging what Dani does here because she's doing a good job of telling the story and getting across that feel that I think Dan Waters wants. It's just not a style that I personally enjoy. So, what are your thoughts, Rocky?
Well, I'll come in on the opposite end of you. I really enjoyed her style. I thought it worked well. I think with the Ten-Eyed Man here, he's creepier than hell. I actually think that while I love that variant cover by Gary Frank, I do think that Dani's artistic sensibilities sort of suits this story a little bit better. But I think I can appreciate where you're coming from. At the same time, I really love the idea that there's something so creepy and mysterious about this Ten-Eyed Man. This takes place after Arkham 80. All the inmates from Arkham, a lot of the criminally insane that are maybe not so criminally insane, all the little hybrids, all the nuances of criminal, mentally ill patients. I mean, the cops are looking for them. And what's crazy about this Ten-Eyed Man is that he thinks that all of Gotham City is the asylum. And he's got a map of Gotham, and he seems to know where all the inmates, all the patients are hiding in Gotham. And he looks at a map of Gotham, and he almost sees it like the hospital, with each individual area of Gotham being like a hospital, being like a room where certain inmates were. And then he seems to know exactly where all these patients are that escaped from Arkham Asylum. He seems to know where they're at. And Dr. Joy is... She's got this Ten-Eyed Man in her basically in her apartment, and she's trying to cure him. She's a little bit kind of obsessed. I guess she's been a failure in her career. She's so desperate to actually cure somebody from Arkham Asylum because no one's ever done that before. I think even Harley Quinn failed to cure anyone from Arkham. Joker, anyone? But Dr. Joy, I mean, she's so desperate to cure the Ten-Eyed Man. And meanwhile, the Ten-Eyed Man is identifying the location of all these other inmates, and in particular, we have this kind of radioactive inmate that's hiding out in apartment buildings and giving radiation poisoning to some of the tenants and some of the, at least one of the apartments. Meanwhile, Solomon Grundy is located by the Ten-Eyed Man. Dr. Joy sort of follows the Ten-Eyed Man around, and I'm not entirely sure where this is going, because obviously you've got to round up all these patients. I'm not clear where this narrative is going. It's called Arkham City: Order of the World, and I'm trying to reconcile the title, Arkham City: The Order of the World. It's Arkham City because the entire city is the asylum. The city itself, Gotham City, has become the asylum, and each individual area of Gotham is where some patients are hiding out, and only the Ten-Eyed Man knows where they're at. but the 10-eyed man is kind of crazy himself. But meanwhile, you got Azrael, who's looking and hunting everyone down. And Azrael now views Dr. Joy as part of the problem because he thinks Dr. Joy has joined the cult of Arkham, basically. And she's been indoctrinated and she's hiding out these patients. And he's not entirely wrong in that. Dr. Joy, her heart's in the right place. And her mind is she wants to cure the 10-eyed man. But it's, I mean, in typical Gotham story fashion, there's always chaos. And I think that I like this. I particularly, I want to give Dani credit for, I like the way she draws Azrael here. I like, he looks creepier than he does in the past with just the red and the black and the stringy, stringy behind him cape. And it's interesting. Azrael seems more creepy here and a little bit more, he feels more religiously fanatical than he has, I think, in the Batman urban legends that we've been reading. Almost like he seems creepier here, and I sort of like this artistic rendition and the narrative version of him as well here. So, I'm intrigued. I'm really curious to see how this ends because I don't know what the fate of Dr. Joy is, and that's what I'm most curious to find out.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, let's move on. We have another Tom Taylor book. It is Dark Knights of Steel #2, written by Tom Taylor. Art is by Yasmin Putri. Colors by Arif Prianto. Letters by Wes Abbott. This was... I don't know. I almost don't know what to think about this. It's interesting. We're getting so many of these sort of titles. This Dark Knights of Steel. We've got Dark Ages from Tom Taylor over on the Marvel side of things. We had previously the DC story. We've got DC versus vampires. It's interesting, these what if or Elseworlds type stories that give a chance for writers to give different versions of the characters. But it's not just different versions of the characters. A lot of times it's hero fighting hero, and that's sort of the thing that I don't know that necessarily works for me, and we're going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it probably on the final book that we talk about as well. But no doubt that this is probably going to sell really well, and it's one of the things that Tom Taylor does exceptionally well. And he established that with the first property that sort of put him on the name of American comics, or on the American comics landscape, that being Injustice. So what do you think of this, Rocky? Dark Knights of Steel #2.
Well, I mean, I'm, he had me in the first issue. I wasn't with you. I never reviewed with you the first issue of this. But I quite liked it. The whole idea of, again, that age old Elseworlds notion of what if, Kal-el's ship crash landed in a different time and place, what could happen? And the whole idea here of him crashing in medieval times and the impact that would have, especially if Jor-El and Laura were on that rocket ship with Kal-el. I thought it's played really well here. We've already talked about sort of a Game of Thrones idea, and other things. I mean, it's been done with, I think that sort of medieval feel with, and all the subplots and twists. I think it's a good influence here. I really like this can go in so many directions. I love the idea we got the Kingdom of Storms with King Jefferson Pierce, Black Lightning with his daughter Anissa and Jennifer, and his son Jacob controlling the thunder, the lightning, and the rain. We've got the House of El. We've got the Amazon Island where Diana of Themyscira is in a relationship with is in a relationship with Princess Zala, who is the daughter of Jor-El and Laura. I mean, the idea that Kal-el has a sister. I mean, well, of course he would have a sister. It's funny how that never even occurred to me that Jor-El and Laura would have another child if they stayed alive. Isn't that odd that it never even occurred to me? And it's so obvious, of course. And just this really feels like there's a story to be told here. And of course, the fact that Bruce Wayne is actually a half brother to Kal-el, how that adds to the mythos with Jor-El being killed by the Green Man at the by that arrow at the end of last issue. And now the big mysteries, who killed Jor-El, and that's revealed in this issue, and the machinations, and he was killed because of a prophecy. Well, what does this prophecy say? Wonder Woman, Diana, is aware of this prophecy. Seems like all the kingdoms, all the various kingdoms are aware of this prophecy. What does this prophecy say? We don't know. John Constantine, who appears to be an advisor to King Jefferson in the Kingdom of Storms, he's aware of it. Clearly, Queen Laura is aware of the prophecy. Kal-el is as well, as he interrogates the person, Oliver, the person who shot the arrow, shot the green kryptonite arrow into the eye of King Jor-El. I mean, I really love this here, and I love at the end where we get Zala, we get revenge is taken at the end of this issue, which raises the stakes. This, I don't, what's not to love about this, man? I don't know. Like, I'm inclined to say that maybe could it be a little bit tropey? Was it maybe predictable? I don't know. Maybe I was just asleep at the wheel here, but I'm enjoying this. I like this. This could go in so many directions, and I have no idea where this is going. I think that there's a villain behind the scenes manipulating everything. There's all the people who have magic are kicked out of the kingdom of the House of El, of course, because their Kryptonians are vulnerable to magic, so it makes sense that they would kick magic wielders out of their kingdom. Meanwhile, what's really at play here? Where's Lex Luthor? Where are these other major villains that we know are villainous in the mainstream DC universe? All these questions that I have, and this is only on issue 2. I personally, if all the power to Tom Taylor, man. If he does even 10% of what he did with Injustice and bringing this to this medieval world, I'm in for the long haul here. I really enjoyed this issue. I thought the art was really good. I apologize. I'll show more of the art. I was babbling so long. I've been neglecting my duty showing some of the art. But I think if I'm nitpicking here, aspects of the art, Yasmin Putri, I think, does overall a pretty good job here. There's a little bit of sloppiness in some spots, but for the most part, I like the power that Bruce Wayne has as somebody who feels he's let Jor-El down. Obviously he did. King Jor-El was killed. The way he chops off Oliver's arm. This is brutal. This is violent. It only hints at who the Green Man is, who I suspect is Hal Jordan, but maybe it's Sinestro. Maybe the Green Man is Sinestro. Maybe it's not Hal Jordan. You never know what's going to happen. A young Constantine. Clearly, you get the sense that King Jefferson almost didn't want to kill Jor-El, but they felt compelled to because of this prophecy. What's so compelling about this prophecy that they feel the need to kill and to make such a dangerous move in this sort of game of Kryptonian thrones, so to speak? I'm captivated by this. I'm intrigued, and because this is so new, this feels fresh to me. This does, and because it can go in any direction, and we know how Tom Taylor likes to kill off characters. So I feel like anyone can die at a moment's notice here, and of course, there's a significant loss for the Pierce family at the end of this. That is quite tragic as well. That's only going to make things more interesting moving forward. So, what do you think about it, Jace?
Yeah, I sort of lean more into it feels tropey camp. Because again, this is other than Harley Quinn, who started out as a villain, but clearly isn't anymore. It's all heroes versus heroes, Yeah, who's the Green Man? You're right. It could be Sinestro. Maybe Tom Taylor will go one better, and it'll be John Stewart. And he's trying to piss off Geoffrey Thorne. But yeah, I do agree that even if that, whether it is Hal Jordan or it's Sinestro or it's Simon Baz or whoever the Green Man is, clearly it's a Green Lantern. It's somebody with a Green Lantern ring or Green Lantern power. They in turn could be being manipulated by another big bad, which I don't know. In my mind, I guess if you want to talk about who could be behind the scenes of all of this, it should be Darkseid, some medieval version of Darkseid. That in my mind is what would work the best. But regardless of that, yeah, it just feels tropey because it's heroes against heroes, and obviously we don't have context or any comparison with a sister for Clark, to say, oh well, she wouldn't have killed the young Prince Pierce, but again, there's no comparison, and maybe that's why, in fact, they have Zala be the one that kills the prince. So it's you can't argue that it's out of character. I did like the fact that Tom Taylor leaned into the whole idea of, hey, it's an island of Amazons. Of course, they're going to be lesbian or at least bisexual.
Yeah.
There's no guys around. You still got needs, right? So I thought that worked well. I didn't necessarily mind that that Jor-El was killed, but it did bother me a little bit that Jor-El had confided into Bruce that, hey, I'm actually your father, which I don't know what that says about Jor-El. I guess it's sort of expected in medieval times that guys sleep around. But what bugs me about it is now Clark blames Bruce for not saving his dad, and Clark has no idea that Bruce is his half brother. Even if Bruce were to tell him, that's just going to piss Bruce off more because he can't go talk to his father about, hey, you slept with a woman that wasn't my mother. Like that whole dynamic, I guess it makes sense in the terms of this is a medieval story and that sort of things happens. But again, it's just very tropey. And so I could do without it. Where this story does shine, though, like you said, the art. I think the art's absolutely fantastic. And it is interesting for me. Don't get me wrong; it's interesting for me to see a medieval version of Clark Kent or Clark-el or Kal-el or whatever name he goes by here. Same thing with Bruce. Same thing with Alfred. Same thing with Constantine and Harley Quinn. Like I love all that, but once I see that version, I'm ready to move on. It's almost like all I need is the Bombshells version, right? Just give me the art. Hey, this is a reimagining of what these characters would look like in medieval times. I
Yeah.
don't need the actual medieval story. And that, again, that's just my own personal taste, but I don't think there's any question that this is well done. And ultimately I may come around if what ends up happening, again, not to play script doctor, but what ends up happening is if Darkseid or whoever's behind the Green Man, whoever the big bad ultimately is, shows up, and we get the kingdom of Jefferson Pierce and the kingdom of I guess Kal-el, now he's the ruler. If they team up against the larger threat, and so
Yeah.
it's not heroes
Well,
fighting heroes, but in a way that just would reinforce the trope, right? Like it used to be the old school Marvel age, like whenever Spider-Man met the Hulk or Fantastic Four, like anytime the heroes met the first time, they always 100% of the time fought against each other, and so that's where this just
yeah. Well,
worked.
and there's even in the prison scene where Kal-el is going to visit and interrogate the Oliver Queen, who shot and killed his father Jor-El. You can see in the background that it looks like there's Barry Allen the Flash. There's the Blue Devil. There's Robin. Could that Robin possibly be Damian and an illegitimate son of Bruce Wayne in this story? We shall see. There's the Killer Shark or King Shark. And there's also, I think that's Aquaman. And then we have Bibbo, the detective chimp. We already have Constantine. And they're all in jail in the House of El. So what's interesting here is, Harley said something to Kal-el. She said, they have lost their world. How much can they endure before they lash out? Almost suggesting that the attack on Jor-El was inevitable. So what did the House of El do what did Jor-El and Lara do when they came to the world? They must have had a profound impact, because you got significant members of the potential Justice League and Justice League Dark in jail in the land of the House of El. So I'm intrigued here. I can't say this is tropey in that respect. There's simply too many directions that the storyline can go for me to predict where this can go. So that's why I'm intrigued. So while I'll grant you that that maybe on the surface there's some shock value tactics being employed here to sort of get our attention, I'm intrigued enough by little things that I've seen in the dialogue and in the narrative that kind of keep me glued to going into the third issue.
Yeah, I I mean, I agree, and that's why I said it could turn around for me, the hero versus hero thing. And yeah, I did. Like I just said, I love seeing these different versions of the characters. So seeing all the characters in the dungeon was pretty fun. Um, and then Bruce, shut up, monkey. Very very Bruce Wayne thing to say. So yeah, I guess we'll see. And you're making obviously the whole idea of, well, we're going to imprison anybody who's magic connected, and not all these heroes necessarily are. Hawkman not necessarily, or maybe it's Hawk Girl, and certainly Barry Allen, but Blue Devil argument could be made. Same thing with King Shark, Aquaman. Um, it makes sense because obviously even in modern day Superman comics, magic is one of the things that he's vulnerable to. But it does make me kind of rethink, well, is it Darkseid, or what could it be? Morgan Le Fay or Mordru, or somebody else that is the big bad rather than Darkseid. But I don't know. To me, Darkseid makes the most sense. But who
Yeah,
knows? We'll see.
I think you could be right. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on. Green Lantern #9, written by Geoffrey Thorne. Tom Rainey, Marco Santucci, Maria Laura Sanapo as the artist. Michael Attea does colors. Rob Lee on letters. It was sort of bad enough when we had Tom Rainey and Marco Santucci as the artists. Now we have a third artist. I don't know. Maybe they're just having a tough time staying on schedule. I love the Marco Santucci art. I even think that Tom Hodges' art, I think, I've said this previously about his art. He's starting to find his footing on these characters. It is a very different style than Marco Santucci, but again, it's been a while since I've seen him draw John where he's looked like a pygmy and the perspectives don't look correct. So I think this is some of the best art he's given us. And it's unfortunate that we have a third artist whose art doesn't quite live up to the other two. But it's only a couple of pages for her, and maybe she just needs to find her footing as well. But ultimately, man, I would love to just have one artist, and I would love it even more if it was Marco Santucci, because to me his art is the best and the most emotionally impactful. Regardless of that, Michael Attea, the colorist, he colors everybody's art, and he's the one in my mind doing the heavy lifting here and
Yeah.
making this work with a consistency of color where despite the fact they're different styles and they're recognizable as different styles, they don't look so different that it pulls you out of the story. So I give Michael Attea a lot of credit for consistency of the colors to help pull these three different styles together. As far as the story itself, well, the Owen storyline, or Joe Mullen storyline, whatever you want to call it, is starting to come together. We've sort of learned who's behind it and whatnot, and it makes sense and it's interesting. And on the complete other end of the spectrum, the Hal Jordan becoming a god storyline it's going off the rails for me. I
Yeah.
don't care. It's getting more and more ludicrous and feels more and more like Jon Stewart fan fiction. Like, I was worried after we had the first issue that this would head in that direction, and then Geoffrey Thorne brought me back around because it felt like he wasn't going that direction, and instead he was actually going in the opposite direction and really giving a lot of context to Jon Stewart and uh, really showing me who Jon Stewart was. But it seemed like he was only doing that to establish a baseline, so that now as Jon Stewart ascends and gains all these powers, it's sort of even more obvious that he's being leveled up. So I don't like, a flat out I don't like it, and that's just a personal thing for me. Maybe if Jon Stewart was my favorite Green Lantern, I would like this. But I think even if this was Hal Jordan, I don't think I would. Who's my favorite Green Lantern? I don't think I would like Hal Jordan being leveled up in this way. The whole idea for me, and why Green Lantern's always been a favorite character for me, is it's the idea that these are regular guys, regardless of, because when you look at who they were before they got their rings, and regardless of Hal Jordan test pilot, there's not a lot of those, but in a lot of ways he's just an average guy, kind of macho and whatnot. Jon Stewart, either way, whether it's the architect original version that I kind of identify or like more, or the Marine guy, or it's Guy Gardner, very much an everyman. Even Simon Boz in a lot of ways, very representative, obviously, of sort of a Middle Eastern or Muslim culture, but still like a regular guy, ultimately. Um, and it's sort of taken even to a further extent with Jessica Cruz. She's not only just like kind of a regular woman, but a regular woman who's deeply flawed because of her anxiety and her agoraphobia, right? So regardless of which one is your favorite Green Lantern, it's the idea of this quintessentially normal person given the most powerful weapon in the universe, and what do they choose to do with that? And I forgot Kyle Rayner. Sorry, Kyle Rayner fans out there. Yeah, same thing, right? Here's a guy who just a graphic artist who meets the last lantern or last guardian in an alley, and has no one to teach him the ropes. Right? These are all just regular people, and the juxtaposition of them gaining the most powerful weapon in the universe, and what do they choose to do with it, and how do they choose to fight against these insane galactic threats? When you take one of those people and you elevate them to the level of godhood or demigod, you're sort of defeating the purpose of where that tension is between a regular person and having this powerful weapon, and what do they choose to do with it. So I think maybe that's why it's not working for me. I think maybe that's what, beyond the fact that John Stewart's not my favorite Green Lantern, whatever, that's sort of beside the point. I think even if this was Hal Jordan, even if it was Kyle Rayner or whoever, I still don't think I would like it. And you could make the argument, well, isn't that what they did with Kyle Rayner when they made him White Lantern? Well, yeah, but he didn't really have control over it, and it wasn't, he didn't manifest the powers all the time. It wasn't to this level. And he was very unsure of himself. So I don't think it's the same thing. This is just so, it feels to me overtly like fan fiction, where it's all about turning John Stewart into the most powerful hero in the DCU. So that, and it's why are you telling this story if this whole time, like, it's been a while, right? This is issue 9. And the other storyline is so interesting. Think how much further along we could be on that plot.
Yeah.
That is so interesting if we weren't wasting time with this John Stewart fan fiction. I don't get it. So I don't know. Maybe your mileage varies. Rocky, what did you think?
I'm afraid I agree with you. I'll be more generous to Geoffrey Thorne. It's clear that he loves John Stewart, and his love for the character does shine through here. I think where I think it comes up short for me is that I think I get a feel of what he's trying to do for John Stewart. He wants to make John Stewart, I guess, the new Lightbringer. For some reason, John Stewart, they're in the dark sector. John Stewart is supposed to be helping, trying to find the other. I mean, there's 1,000 Green Lanterns in the dark sector. 300 were killed. He's trying to save the remaining 700. And then suddenly we got sidetracked with John Stewart from Lonar, the new guard, telling him that he's going to ascend and become a new god, but not quite a new god, but something. And Lonar is being deliberately vague. Geoffrey Thorne, the writer, is being deliberately vague. He's dragged on this mystery that I don't think many people care about for the last 5-6 issues already. Who cares? There's even a flashback here that wastes 4 or 5 pages with John Stewart remembering back when he was a kid in high school, being bullied or fighting bullies. And then we're supposed to get a lesson here that, the teacher morphs into a guardian and says, John Stewart, there are many ways to defeat brutality. Violence is the least useful. Okay, so is that your way of saying that John Stewart's going to ascend and become a god? Okay, but even being transformed and taken to the Lightbringer world, where this other new god called, out of the blue, this other new god, Isaac of New Genesis, is the harbinger of the Lightbringer. Okay, so he's creating this Lightbringer god. Why? So what? Like, why are we transported to Lightbringer world? We're never told. Why is it a big deal? And then the Lightbringer god, in order to create this god, is draining the life forces from these other people on this Lightbringer world. So John Stewart stops that, and then at the end, he destroys the Lightbringer, but that creates a god storm. Okay, well, what's the point? Like, you're gonna create a godstorm is created, which is the end of everything. What of it? I don't. Geoffrey Thorne has been unsuccessful in explaining to us, the readers, why we're supposed to care, because this feels like a detour, and it's felt like a detour that's lasted 5 issues. I care about getting to the bottom of who was murdering all those Green Lanterns. That's what I care about. And getting out of the dark sector. And I'm really excited about the storyline of what's happening on Oa. Joe Mulleen's character, as she's investigating what really happened on Oa. Why did the central battery explode? I actually love this. It was far more interesting, far better art, quite frankly. I think that's Marie Santucci's art is much better. I love the idea. It's fine. We're finally getting an explanation as to why the central power battery exploded, and that it has to do with a betrayal of one of the Guardians, basically allying himself with this with the allying himself with the Bright Circle terrorists that at the beginning infiltrated the United Planets Assembly and assassinated one of the Guardians. But that was all misdirection. This Uridian character, which is magic based, they had a dispute with the Guardians eons ago, and the Guardians, of course, hid them away and took their magic away from them. And this is just one massive ploy for this Uridian and her people, the Bright Circle terrorists, to sort of get their magic back from the Guardians. And in order to do that, they had a plan in order to for Koyos. Koyos, am I saying that right? Koyos Guardian, that he was going to negotiate with the Guardians, but the failsafe, the secondary backup plan, was to shoot Koyos with an arrow, and then inside the arrow was something that during his funeral, when his body entered the central power battery, it exploded, and that's what destroyed the central power battery. That's kind of interesting. I kind of like that, and that threw off everything. And now the Green Lanterns are weakened, and now they're at their weakest point, and now the rest of these magic-based creatures can come into play because they only got half their magic, but they need the rest of it. That's actually interesting to me. This feels like such a disconnect between the other storyline with John Stewart that I just don't care about. And the other thing is, are we just going to get a Duke Ex Machina ending where John Stewart's going to become a god and then fly into the central power battery and power up the battery again with his massive John Stewart? I'm the new torchbearer. I'm gonna repower the power battery now. I mean, don't get me wrong. Kyle Rayner did that too. Kyle Rayner was a torchbearer, so I'm not, I get it. I guess you can do it, but didn't we kind of already get that storyline already? I'm not sure if this is saying anything new other than just propping up another Green Lantern character, but not really telling a new tale. But the jury's out. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but this is a very choppy tale, and unfortunately, I know a lot of people that opted out of this series quite a long time ago. And I will say this as well. I think I had to reread this multiple times, reread previous issues. I thought that the Joe Mulleen story, I thought there was at least 6-7 pages that should have been told recapping. Instead, a lot of pages were wasted with beautiful art and beautiful colors. I mean, really beautiful colors here. The art's fantastic, but Geoffrey Thorne consistently fails to tell a cohesive story that's easy to follow. And he doesn't have the excuse that he doesn't have enough issues. He's got plenty of issues. This story should not be as confusing as it is. But for some reason, it always feels confusing. And I always feel like I'm lost. And I shouldn't feel that way. And I know I'm not the only one. I mean, because normally I could say I can follow my sword and say, okay, sometimes it's just me. But it's not just me. There's lots of people that aren't understanding what the hell's going on here.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the problem where he's basically telling two different stories, two different main plot threads, as opposed to if it was just one, we wouldn't feel like, pages were being wasted or, yeah. So anyway, let's move on. Next book we're going to talk about, Suicide Squad number 10, Spaced. This is from writer Robbie Thompson. Eduardo Pansica and Julio Ferreira do the art on pages 1 through 3 and 16 through 22. Dexter Soy does pages 4 through 15. Marcelo Maialo and Alan Pasalacqua on colors. Wes Abbott on letters. Once again, I will say, hey, it's great that this book is on time. It's not so great that we don't have consistency of art. Love Eduardo Pansica's art. I think it's absolutely fantastic and detailed. I'm less a fan of the Dexter Soy art, but it still works. But either way, I'd be fine with either one of these guys doing the whole book. It's just too bad that that's not the case. But man, that Eduardo Pansica full page Black Hand, oh man, that is gorgeous. So I'm liking what's going on here. I complained a little bit or wondered last issue about the idea of taking Suicide Squad into space. They end up recruiting this bird skull dude named Yorick. That's a nickname for him because he has some alien name they can't even pronounce. But all along, Amanda Waller is pulling the strings, and it makes sense for who Amanda Waller is. The whole idea of them in space, it's a little far-fetched to see Talon and Calibra out there in zero gravity fighting and whatnot. Nocturna, she's way back in her early appearances in Detective Comics. You would never think of her as a character to be out there in space. So it's a little problematic, but at the end of the day, it's fun. And the fact that, all along Amanda Waller was after Black Hand, it does make a lot of sense. Major Disaster is a total dick. He always has been.
Surprise.
Yeah, no stretch for Robbie Thompson there on the characterization. So yeah, I enjoyed this issue. I am over the moon about Suicide Squad because I talked about it before, where when we got it was announced that this new series was coming, and we got a preview of the cover, and Peacemaker was right there front and center, and it just felt like pandering to me, because obviously the James Gunn Suicide Squad movie was upcoming and to be followed by a Peacemaker HBO Max series, and so I wasn't a fan. It felt like he was being kind of shoved down my throat, but regardless, I'm sure Robbie Thompson was told, okay, you're going to write Suicide Squad, Peacemaker's got to be part of the team. He made it work. He did a great job. And despite the fact that for the most part on this main Suicide Squad team, there are no sort of traditional Suicide Squad members that we're used to seeing. There's no Deadshot. There's no Captain Boomerang. It still works. There's no Harley Quinn. He's doing a great job. The only thing I would say is I would not have minded. We got one, right on the last page, we finally saw Rick Flag and his Suicide Squad team that he's put together, that wants to take out Amanda Waller. I am very anxiously awaiting that team. So we've got Cheetah, we've got Mirror Master, we've got this. We've got Peacemaker on the team also, and the Parademon. And do you know who that's in the back with the Z on his chest?
That's Lars Zod, the son of General Zod.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yep. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that because I can't wait for Amanda Waller to get what's coming to her. I also, I wouldn't have ever thought of Match, who I'm not really that familiar with, pairing him off with Nocturna, which I think is actually a interesting pairing. Nocturna comes across a little younger here than I've ever seen her, but it works. And at least their kids would have the same complexion. Matching
hey, it's a good match. Get it?
Yeah. So yeah, and there's some great characterization of Culebra here as well. So yeah, pleasantly surprised that Robbie Thompson has exceeded all my expectations for Suicide Squad. This is a great book. It really, really is. Love the characterization. That's the strength of this book in my mind. And Pansica and Soy are up to the task with making sure that emotion and characterization interactions come across well. So you're enjoying it too, Rocky, right?
I am enjoying it, and yeah, I'm enjoying it. And the pieces are in place. Amanda Waller now has all the pieces in place. She's got a piece of the Rock of Eternity. She's got a bit of the piece of the Owen Power Battery. She now has at the end of this issue, she now has acquired the Black Hand from Green Lantern fans managed to acquire the Black Hand from the prison, from the science cells on Oa. So getting captured by Joe Mulin, getting captured by Joe the Green Lantern here was all intentional. And all with the idea to power up and to protect Earth-3, because Amanda Waller is fascinated with Earth-3. She wants to make that her world and shield it off the rest of the multiverse. Uh, and so it's very, very interesting. Also, I just want to make a point here that we got an origin here for Culebra, which is interesting. Apparently, her origin is tied to the former spy organization known as Spiral, which was the old spy organization that Dick Grayson, as Grayson, worked for back during the I guess that would have been during the New 52 or the Reaper. Anyways, I can't remember, but in any event, interesting enough, she was experimented upon, and then of course Amanda Waller came along, promised Culebra, come work for us, we'll protect you from Spiral. But then who's going to protect you from Amanda Waller, right? And per Culebra. Interesting here about the Lazarus thing. We've talked before about how the Lazarus pit, the Lazarus pills, the Lazarus resin. It's Lazarus, Lazarus, Lazarus. It's like Marsha, Marsha, Marsha. Everybody's got a little bit of Lazarus something here. But there's a new twist on the Lazarus power here, or the Lazarus pill. It's interesting that in the pages of Task Force Z, the Lazarus pill, it resurrects the body, but its effects wear off that you can eventually die again. And the same effect here occurs with Culebra, but for whatever reason, when this Lazarus pill, when it wears off, it actually turns Culebra into a ghost presence that allows her to become immaterial and to, dematerialize and to walk through walls and ultimately free Black Hand from the science cells. So it's weird that how the Lazarus resin seems to have a different effect than a Lazarus pill from the Lazarus pits. I mean, there seems to be different variations on the use of Lazarus liquid or Lazarus fluid.
I don't necessarily buy that. I think Lazarus resin is Lazarus resin, but I will say the reason that it works this way in this book is because the writer needs it to.
Exactly.
but if we want to play, kind of Marvel no prize game here and impress Robbie Thompson, and if Robbie listens to this, feel free to use this as your reason. It could be that because that happened, or you could say this is happening to Culebra because the first time she died, she was actually in hell.
Yeah.
And then that's where her spirit was. And so, I mean, I guess you could make that a reason, but the real reason is because the writer needed it to be that way.
But another reason could be the experiments that were done on her by Spiral maybe changed her body chemistry or something too. So, but it's just sort of interesting that, like you said, every writer seems to be playing fast and loose with this Lazarus. They're really taking this Lazarus thing and just riding it for all it's worth. I mean, good grief. I kind of chuckle at it a little bit. Also a minor little nitpick here. I mean, I think Jo Mullein as a Green Lantern, I love her as Green Lantern, but I think she's been overused. I mean, we have so many Green Lanterns. We still have Hal Jordan. It seemed to me that we probably could have had other Lanterns there. I know most of them are taken off the playing field, but we could have seen Hal Jordan here. I was a little bit surprised that, I don't think it's possible for her to be in this many places at once. But again, that's a minor little nitpick here. Overall, pretty good. I love seeing Nocturna and Match together. A good match. And I like it. And I love seeing Colonel Flag with the Cheetah, the Parademon, Larzad, Mirror Master, and Bloodsport. I can't wait to see to the clashing of these various Suicide Squad teams. And ultimately, they're still going to clash on Earth 3 at some point. And at some point, we know that they're going to be taking the Crime Syndicate off the playing field because we know in Future State, the Crime Syndicate is actually defeated. So we haven't even seen that battle yet. So I'm hoping for a Suicide Squad Crime Syndicate fight issue, and I hope Robbie Thompson has that in store for us. So overall, I'm happy. I'm as happy as you are on this title.
Yeah, I'll be even happier if Amanda Waller finally gets her reckoning. And I didn't mention this when we were talking about Dark Knights of Steel. I think I blocked it out, but I'll mention it here because we're talking about Amanda Waller.
Yeah.
I could have done without seeing the medieval version of Amanda Waller.
General Waller.
Oh my, come on, Taylor. Can we just have one goddamn book without Amanda Waller in it? For God's sake. So anyway, let's move on. Crushing Lobo number 7. This is from writer Mariko Tamaki. Amin Kane Nahalapin is the artist. Colors by Tamara Bonvillain. Letters by Ariana Mayer. This is okay. I feel like I want to like this book more than I do. I've talked in the past about the fact that I'm not the biggest fan of Lobo, and I never really was familiar with Crush before we started reading this. And this series for me, though, I'll get like one or two issues where I'm like, man, I'm really glad I'm reading this. This is really enjoyable. And then the next issue is just kind of meh. And this is one of those sort of meh issues, and maybe it's because it has so much of Lobo in it. The whole issue is basically one long chase scene between Crush and Lobo, where you think that Crush in the end gets her man, and takes him back to the prison just in time before her time is up and she's killed, and then come to find out, maybe Lobo was in on this all along, because they say now entering with inmate number 2981 and test subject 2981B. Like, wait, test subject? Wait, what? So was Lobo in this all along? Was he not? And the prison and the powers that be were doing something unbeknownst to him, and Lobo and Crush are going to team up to escape the prison together. This certainly hasn't been some sort of touchy-feely series about Crush and Lobo, reconciling as father and daughter, which I never really expected it to be, despite the fact that that's what Crush wanted to be. So I don't know how to feel about this. I'm not really invested in these characters. Like I said, this is my first exposure to Crush, and I've never really cared about Lobo one way or the other. But there have been some really good issues and sort of emotional and impactful issues, and some others that are just not just not that. And this is one of those not that issues. I imagine if you're a fan of Lobo and you like the crazy over the top violence and action and dynamic art, that this is what you've signed up for. And I'll say that the writing and the pacing, the artwork, everything makes for a technically very good comic. But for me, I don't really have a connection to these characters. When I get an issue like this, it's just kind of like, okay, yeah, it's Crush and Lobo. It kind of is what it is. But I am curious to see how it's all going to wrap up. Is it going to be a situation where Lobo was in on it, and set up Crush, and that's the whole reason they let him out in the first place, or is it going to be Crush and Lobo escaping together? We have one issue to go, and I still don't have any idea what the point of the series is. I guess you'd say, because it certainly wasn't what it was sort of sold to us as, which was this exploration of their relationship. Because it's like you would kind of think, okay, they finally spend a significant amount of time together in the pages of this issue, but it's time spent just chasing each other and punching each other. There's no actual, hey, let's sit down and have a meaningful conversation, which maybe that's not on the table for these characters, and wouldn't ever be. So I'm not the guy to say that one way or the other, because again, I'm not heavily invested in these characters. So any thoughts on this one, Rocky?
Look, I'll give Mariko Tamaki credit here. This is a fun Lobo. This is probably one of the more fun issues of her run on this series so far, this miniseries so far. I mean, half this issue is Lobo running around naked and everyone being disgusted, looking at a naked Zarnian running around, and his daughter being equally repulsed, chasing her dad and helping him, and running into old nemesis like that coffee kind of character that she met in the beginning, and just crazy nonsense. Tamara Bonvillain's art or colors here really pop off the page. Does a really good job. The art here is really good. I'm not familiar with this artist, Amanke Nahuelpan. I mean, just really, I think the art's really good. And this is one giant glorified action sequence of an issue. 22 pages of fun, and just a lot of action. And like you said, at the end, there's some misdirection there. Just when Crush thinks she finally returns her dad to prison, she ends up becoming a test subject as well. So there's more to it than meets the eye. You got to wonder if maybe Lobo had this planned all along. And, this is, that there's going to be father and daughter here, Lobo and Crush. Obviously, I'm really hoping that there's an emphasis on the dysfunction in their relationship, and it looks like Mariko Tamaki is making it as dysfunctional as possible, and that's a good thing because the last thing I want is Lobo being in a functional relationship with his daughter. I mean, these are the last two Zarnians. These are the last two remnants of the Zarnian race, and they are angry, upset, and frankly, uh, they're basically screwed up individuals, and that's the way I want my Lobo and Crush to be. So this is a fun series. I didn't necessarily need it, but it is fun. I think Mariko Tamaki, she knew the story she had to tell. I think she's had fun with it. I think this is in keeping with the Lobo character. I wasn't a big fan of some of the earlier issues where I thought there was too much of an emphasis on Crush's relationship with her oh so perfect billionaire girlfriend. I think that's just that's just not Crush to me. I don't think of Crush being in a functional relationship with a human. I'm sorry, I just don't. So that didn't work for me. This issue doesn't have any of those flashbacks with her girlfriend. This is just Lobo fun, Crush fun, in space, whooping it up, having a good time, a zany adventure, and dysfunction all around. So this has one of my higher grades in the series.
Cool. All right, well, let's move on to last book. We're going to talk about it's One Star Squadron from writer Mark Russell. Steve Lieber's the artist. Dave Stewart on colors. Dave Sharp on letters. This doesn't say Black Label on it. It's a limited series, one of six, but it certainly feels like it should be called out as being away from main continuity. I mean, I'm a big fan of Mark Russell. He's a satirist. He has a lot to say about society and through the lens of fiction and superheroes specifically. And most of the time, I find it very enjoyable. But when it's hard when he takes a character that you're a big fan of and has them act in a way that doesn't seem consistent with everything you've read from that character previously. And
Yeah.
this is kind of what I was getting at with the when I was talking about Dark Knights of Steel. So in this issue, there's this or the story, there's this organization called Heroes for You, HEROZ, the number for you, and it's an app and it's a way you can hire heroes, and it's kind of funny when you think about it, like how are these heroes making money, or how are they paying their bills. They talk about, hey, we do bar mitzvahs and birthday parties, you can hire us for all these different things. And it's Red Tornado's the leader of this branch of it, at least. Maybe there's more than one branch that hasn't necessarily been called out specifically, but he talks about becoming a member of the Justice League and feeling like he was doing everything he needed to do, to learn how to be human because he is an android and be a hero. But at the end of the day, here come the bills, and he had no way to pay them because he didn't have like a regular job. So sort of realistic in that way. How to be human, how to be a hero, whatever. And so he is such a quintessentially human character and always has been, in terms of the emotion and how much he cares about other people. So when Gangbuster is dumped on their doorstep by some really unscrupulous sort of medical professionals who are tired of taking care of him, honestly, they just go and literally drop him off on the doorstep of Heroes for You. And Red Tornado, again, with that compassion, is trying to figure out, they don't know that it's Gangbuster. Gangbuster seems to be suffering from um, effects of brain damage from all the punches he's taken over the years. Red Tornado's trying to find out where he's from, trying to take care of him, being that compassionate character he is. Leaves his sort of second in command in charge, which is Power Girl, um, and she seems to be a real go-getter in this particular story. And there's even at one point where Heckler's like, "You have real powers, right? You're legitimately a Kryptonian. Why are you working here?" And she talks about having read Maxwell Lord's book and how it changed your life, and money is power. It's much better than superpower. This doesn't sound anything like any Power Girl that I've ever read. And then at the end, who's talking to the board of directors of Heroes for You and throwing Red Tornado under the bus. And like, I get it. Mark Russell is making a commentary on this, and again, I'm a fan of this sort of thing. but I think this specifically needs to have a black label on it. So because this is not Power Girl, like this is a really crappy thing to do, you know. And so I don't know. Maybe Mark Russell will turn it around. I don't know how to feel about this. After one issue, it's too soon to sell. Too soon to tell. It is quintessentially a. It feels like a very Mark Russell book, and Steve Lieber art is great in terms of adding little quirks here and there to make it humorous. But I think I would feel better about this if it were specifically called out as being out of continuity. Because in a way, you're disparaging some of these characters, and just because they're B-list characters doesn't mean like I'm a fan. I like a lot of lower tier characters. You know, some of the characters you probably say are like Z-list characters. You know, but they still have value as characters as heroes. So I get it. You gotta maybe portray them differently or have them do different things. There's got to be some tension there. Um, there's got to be character drama to tell a story. So somebody's got to be the quote unquote bad guy. And if you choose to make a Power Girl, fine, but not the regular Power Girl. You know what I mean? So that was the problem that I had with it. But I'm in for another issue. We'll see what happens. What did you think, Rocky? Did you enjoy it?
No, I didn't. I really didn't. And I'm gonna, in the spirit of trying to be as diplomatic as I can, this is a story that's not for me. I actually, I'm normally most of what Mark Russell has written I can get into because it's obvious he's about parody, political satire. I get it, and frankly, this is just not my cup of tea. In the DC omniverse of things, all stories matter. This story matters to someone. It doesn't matter to me. You're very diplomatic about it. I view this. I understand that this was intended to be. Maybe he's trying to say something about he's trying to say something about something. But here's how I feel about it. Reading this, I ask myself, what's the point of this comic? Who is the audience for this comic? What is it trying to say? Red Tornado. Okay, it established that he's a loser. He can't pay his bills. Power Girl is power hungry. She's not much of a hero. She's just out. She believes the best way to change the world is to just make a lot of money. Gangbuster is made a mockery of. He's a joke of a character. I guess we're supposed to laugh at the character called Minuteman because his powers last 1 minute. Oh, isn't that funny? I just think these jokes are just sad and pathetic. We got the Heckler and we got G.I. Robot that are glorified salesmen for Power Girl. We know that Power Girl herself, I mean, I'm so disappointed in Power Girl. Why can't we have a Power Girl series, bring Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda O'Connor and reignite a Power Girl series and give her some gravitas and some agency and some bring back that series. Instead, why are we getting this? One-star Squadron? Who cares? This isn't funny. This isn't entertaining. I didn't enjoy this at all. This is an insult. People talk about Tom King making a mockery out of characters, which I think is not as much. I think is overwrought to begin with, and I think is overly critical of Tom King. But this, I mean, I guess we're supposed to forgive Mark Russell because it's supposed to be a parody. So I guess he gets a free rein because it's satire and meant to be this way. Well, okay, but I'm just going to choose. I'm not a fan of this. Power Girl in the the version of Power Girl we had before. The last time we heard of Power Girl, she was actually running off to Earth 2. This was in pre-death metal, and she left. She was a billionaire. Karen Starr is a billionaire. She went back to Earth 2 and left her billion-dollar empire to Tanya Spears, the new Power Girl, and they both ended up I think it was a Deathstroke Annual number 4. They ended up in the Innerverse. Both Tanya Spears and Karen Starr were lost in the Innerverse, and then presumably at some point may have gotten out of that for death metal. But anyways, my point being is that is actually that flowed from the pages of Deathstroke. That had to do with Power Girl, Tanya Spears. That's what I'm interested in reading about. But no, we're getting this story here because it's really important that we're supposed to look at Red Tornado. Is he supposed to be like this? Is he trying to do like Tom King did with the Vision here? Like, I don't there's not. Where's the drama? What's the actual point of this story? Are we supposed to care that Gangbuster is mentally downtrodden and his ex-wife or this friend of Gangbuster pretends she doesn't even know who he is? There is nothing about this story that interests me at all. I read this as an escape, to escape my life. If my life was as pathetic as Red Tornadoes, why would I want to read about my life if it was this pathetic? Seriously. And since my life is not this pathetic, I'm not sure why I would want to read about this. This isn't a parody. I'm not entertained by this. This isn't funny. I don't, I just, but hey, I'm sure this is for somebody, but this is a 1-star Squadron. I give this a 1 star, whether it's out of 5 or out of 10 or out of 20. I'm very disappointed in this. The art's fine, but I mean, if you want to do something funny, why not do Justice League International? But we already got Blue and Gold as a series. Why are we getting this vain attempt at another humor comic, which I think fails spectacularly in my mind? But Mark Russell, I like Mark Russell. I enjoyed some of his Future State issues, but this is a significant miss for me. I'm sorry, and that's as diplomatic as I can say it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is supposed to be funny. You're right. It
I don't
certainly
know.
isn't. It's what Mark Russell does. He does satire, but honestly, the overall feel and tone of this issue that I get, this is just sad.
Yeah,
It's sad. These aren't superheroes.
depressing.
They're pathetic. It,
Like,
yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Like, who wants to read about? And that's kind of what I was getting at. Even if it's B or C or D or Z list characters, there still should be some level of respect. There's there's worth in those creations to tell stories about heroism. You could
yeah.
make the argument there's worth in telling stories of these characters where you are satirizing and using these characters to make a comment on society and whether we give people with mental issues enough help, or if there's enough opportunity for people who are in the middle class just trying to tell their bills. Like, I totally agree that there's value there too, but again, stamp this with the black label so somebody doesn't pick this up thinking that this is indicative of what the regular DC universe is
Oh,
like. You know what I
yeah.
mean? So anyway, that does it for the issues that we're going to get into detail on. There are a couple of other books that came out this week, so let me give you a rundown on what those are. We had an issue of the Justice League Infinity title, which is basically a continuation of the Justice League cartoon. That's issue number 6. We also had The Joker Presents a Puzzle Box, issue 5, which is a digital first from Matthew Rosenberg. In the horror line, DC Horror presents Soul Plumber number 3. And then as far as collected editions, there are a number of those coming out this week from DC as well. And of course, want to mention them because they always make really good Christmas gifts. So if you're looking to buy something, I definitely would recommend the Batman Urban Legends Volume 1 trade paperback, because you're going to get exposed to a lot of different Batman characters there. Also, we talked about Swamp Thing issue number 10. Well, the first volume, which has the first 5 issues of Ram V's Swamp Thing, gets a collected edition. And there's also a Saga of the Swamp Thing box set, which collects all of the complete run of Saga of the Swamp Thing from back in the 80s. So those are some collected editions that are out this week if you are so inclined. And that's going to do it for this episode. So as I said earlier, everybody, don't forget to be on the lookout for the wrap up for LA Comic Con and my chat with Chris, their CEO. And then, did you have anything you want to plug that's coming up later this week, Rocky?
Well, I did do. I was a guest on Nerdette's Newsstand with Comic Breakdown and Nerdette's Newsstand. That you can check out Nerdette's Newsstand YouTube channel. I did that yesterday, and I thank her for being on her channel. We had a lot of fun talking about DC Comics. And this week, I do intend on putting out a little bit more an in-depth review of Wonder Woman Historia that I may or may not do a collaboration with you on, Jace. That'll depend on your schedule. I know you're busy, but we'll see about that. And yeah, beyond that, just everybody, hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to Comic Boom ! And certainly check out Jace at the Comic Source. And yeah, It's always good reviewing DC Comics with you, Jace.
Yep, appreciate that. And hopefully, everybody, I'm going to have the announcement. I mean, 12 Days of the Comic Source starts next week, so I really need to get on it with the graphics so you guys can know what's coming up with that. We have a really cool thing we're going to do this year, and I'm bringing back giveaways this year as well, so you want to be sure you're listening and get some cool free stuff. So, again, we want to thank everybody for your support as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
See you later.